Welcome to another deep dive with us this week. This time around, we're going to be looking at media and pop culture, but through a pretty unique lens. We're going to be using a comedy radio show. It's called Past Week, Next Week with Chris and Paul, and we're going to be dissecting their humor to try to uncover some surprising insights into society, mental health, and even how comedy itself is changing.
A comedy radio show, huh? I have to admit, I'm intrigued. It's not every day you associate comedy with deep insights.
Right, you might be thinking, can we really get anything valuable from something that's meant to make us laugh?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, but that's exactly what we're here to find out, right?
Yeah. I think we often underestimate how much cultural commentary and societal observations are actually woven into humor.
I think you're right. When you think about it, comedians often hold up a mirror to society. They point out the absurdities and contradictions and make us laugh at ourselves in the process.
Exactly. And this particular show, Past Week, Next Week with Chris and Paul, they really do a good job of that. One thing that stood out to me right away was when Chris, one of the hosts, actually read an excerpt from his own book during the show. And he talked about the importance of humor for mental well-being.
Oh, interesting.
He even mentioned a statistic comparing modern teenagers' anxiety levels to those of, get this, institutionalized patients in the 1950s.
Wow. That's a pretty stark comparison.
It is, isn't it? It's been jarring to hear those kinds of stats on a comedy show.
Yeah, you don't exactly expect a dose of reality with your laughs.
Right.
But I think it speaks to this growing awareness of mental health and how even platforms designed for entertainment are grappling with these serious topics.
Absolutely. It's not just about acknowledging the issue, though. Chris went on to express gratitude for the role his show plays in helping people cope with mental health struggles.
Okay.
He talked about laughter being a release valve for stress and anxiety.
I like that. It brings a human touch to the show.
Yeah. It shows a genuine concern for the listeners and adds a layer of depth that goes beyond just trying to be funny.
Definitely. It makes you wonder, though, does using humor to address these sensitive topics trivialize them, or does it make them more approachable?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's something we'll probably be grappling with throughout this deep dive. It's a delicate balance for sure.
For sure.
Humor, done well, can be disarming. It can make people more receptive to ideas they might otherwise tune out. But it's a fine line between sparking thoughtful discussion and crossing into offensiveness.
Absolutely.
And I think in this case with Chris and Paul, they seem to be using humor to encourage critical thinking rather than just aiming for cheap laughs.
Ah, I see.
Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have Paul, the other host, and he often uses humor to comment on current events. One example that comes to mind is his joke about Walmart offering a Trump discount on adult diapers and bladder control pads in response to the stock market dip.
Okay, I'm already starting to see how they weave those societal observations into their humor.
Right. It's classic satire. Using humor to poke fun at a political figure and his perceived base.
And it's not just a one-off joke either, is it?
No, not at all. Throughout the show, they take jabs at various politicians.
So they're using humor as a form of social and political commentary.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it really is.
And it brings us back to that question of whether humor trivializes these topics or makes them more accessible.
Right.
It's a tough one to answer.
It is. But I think it's a conversation worth having.
Agreed.
Now, in another interesting segment, they decided to review some pharmaceutical commercials.
Oh, that's different.
Yeah, I thought so too. There was one for Jardiance, a diabetes medication, and they listed a whole bunch of alarming side effects.
Oh, I've seen those commercials. The ones where they try to make light of serious side effects.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was one for Wegovy, the weight loss drug, you know the one, with this seemingly endless parade of happy people who'd previously struggled with obesity.
Right, right. It's almost like they're trying to sell you a lifestyle rather than a drug.
Exactly.
It's a stark contrast, isn't it? You have this cheerful, upbeat tone, but then they list all these potentially serious side effects.
It really does make you question the ethics of direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising.
Yeah. Are they downplaying the risks? Creating unrealistic expectations?
Right. And it's not just about these specific commercials. It's a broader issue about how we consume information about our health and how advertising can influence our decisions.
It's a good reminder to be informed consumers. Do your research. Talk to your doctor. Don't just take those ads at face value.
Absolutely. Now, shifting gears a bit, they also talked about the recent 50th anniversary special of Saturday Night Live, discussing everything from beloved returning characters to sketches that haven't exactly aged well.
SNL, huh? 50 years is a long time. I bet that was a fascinating conversation.
It was, and it really highlighted how comedy evolves alongside societal values. What was once considered funny can become problematic over time.
It makes you think about how humor reflects the times we live in and how our perspectives change.
Exactly. One detail that really jumped out at me was Tom Hanks, during the special, made a joke about how the audience should be the ones canceled for laughing at the offensive material in the first place.
Wow. That's pretty meta and thought-provoking.
It is, isn't it? It makes you think about the audience's role in the evolution of humor. Are we, as viewers, partly responsible for holding comedians accountable?
It's a good question. Definitely something to ponder.
For sure. Now, finally, we get to the AI portion of our deep dive. The hosts shared what they thought was an AI-generated listener comment that provided a very detailed and, let's just say, graphic critique of one of Paul's jokes.
AI and comedy. Now, that's an interesting combination.
It is, and it really highlights how AI is increasingly permeating creative spaces, even offering comedic commentary.
So we have AI writing jokes now.
Well, not exactly writing jokes, but offering critiques and analysis.
I see. It makes you wonder what role AI will play in shaping humor in the future.
Absolutely. And more importantly, are there unintended consequences we need to be aware of, like bias creeping in or the potential for AI to be used for harmful purposes?
Those are important considerations.
They are. And it's something we need to be thinking about as AI becomes more sophisticated, especially in the realm of creative expression.
Agreed.
You know, it's interesting. They actually received 2 very different AI responses to the same joke. One was lighthearted, but the other was deeply disturbing.
So even AI can have a sense of humor, or lack thereof.
It seems that way.
It really highlights the unpredictable nature of AI, especially when it comes to something as nuanced as humor.
Right. And it begs the question, can AI truly understand and generate humor? Or is it just mimicking patterns it's been trained on?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. And it's a question that has huge implications for the future of comedy and for the role of AI in our lives.
Absolutely. This is already shaping up to be a fascinating deep dive.
I agree. And we've only just scratched the surface.
I can't wait to see where this goes.
Me too. So let's dive in and see what other insights we can uncover.
Let's do it. It really makes you think about how we need to be so much more careful in a world where AI is everywhere, determining what's real, what might be biased, and what's just total nonsense.
Absolutely. It's a challenge we're all going to have to face. But let's get back to this radio show for a sec. One thing that really caught my attention was how they covered some recent news stories. There's a report about a Delta Airlines plane that flipped over while landing. It happened at Pearson Airport in Toronto.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty scary. Luckily, nobody was hurt.
That's good to hear.
It is. But it definitely makes you think about safety protocols and the possibility of human error, you know?
Yeah, those things are always in the back of your mind when you fly.
For sure. Of course, Chris and Paul found a way to inject some humor into the situation.
Oh.
They blamed their fictional Canadian friend Murph for the mishap.
Oh, that's funny.
It was. It was a lighthearted way to acknowledge a serious incident. But still keeping with the show's comedic tone.
I like that. It's a way to address those tough topics without getting too bogged down.
Right. And that seems to be a recurring theme for them, finding humor in the midst of chaos. They also discussed the ongoing war in Ukraine.
Oh, right. That's a heavy topic.
It is. They talked about Vice President J.D. Vance's meeting with President Zelensky in Germany.
I remember hearing about that.
And there was that report of a Russian drone strike hitting the Chernobyl nuclear power plant.
Oh, that's right. That was a scary one.
Definitely. It's a reminder of just how real the dangers are in this conflict.
They make light of the situation.
Not really. I mean, Paul had some pretty pointed jokes about J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, and Tucker Carlson's perceived allegiance to Putin.
Wait, so they're not afraid to use humor to critique those they disagree with?
Not at all. That's where their satirical edge really comes through.
I see.
They're using humor to point out hypocrisy and challenge those they see as undermining U.S. interests.
It's interesting how they're able to balance that humor with serious commentary.
Yeah. It's a delicate balance for sure. And speaking of satire, one of their recurring segments is called President Trump's Promises Made, Promises Kept.
I sense some irony there.
Oh, definitely. It's brilliant. They highlight the disconnect between Trump's rhetoric and reality.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. They talked about Trump's claims about tackling inflation, contrasting them with reports of rising prices and a shaky stock market.
So they're using humor to expose the gap between words and actions?
Exactly.
This is a clever way to hold those in power accountable.
Absolutely. They even went through a list of Trump's 13 biggest lies during his first month back in office.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
I'm guessing that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, absolutely. But they managed to present it in a way that's both informative and humorous, using satire to showcase the absurdity of it all.
Like what?
Well, there was that outlandish claim that he won the youth vote by a huge margin, when exit polls clearly showed otherwise.
Oh, right.
It's ridiculous. But it also reminds us to be critical of what we hear. Don't just take things at face value.
Especially in this day and age.
Exactly. And then there's that bit about Elon Musk finding gillions and jillions in government waste and sending everyone $8,000 checks.
Wait a minute. Is that a real thing?
No, of course not. It's pure satire. They're playing on Musk's larger-than-life persona and this idea that he's some kind of economic savior.
Okay, I see. So they're using humor to point out the absurdity of that kind of thinking?
Right.
It's funny because it's so ridiculous, but it also makes you think about the dangers of blindly following charismatic figures, especially when they offer simplistic solutions to complex problems.
Exactly. And the fact that they claim to have already received their checks just adds another layer of absurdity.
It's like they're saying, if you believe this, you'll believe anything.
Right. Which sadly might be true for a segment of the population.
It's a cautionary tale for sure.
It is. It's about the importance of critical thinking and media literacy, especially in this age of misinformation.
Couldn't agree more.
Speaking of critical thinking, they have this news quiz segment. It's always interesting to hear how well they do when it comes to current events.
So are they news junkies or just casual observers?
It's hard to say. Their knowledge seems to be a bit hit or miss. Some impressive insights mixed with moments of, shall we say, less than stellar awareness.
Sounds relatable.
It is. They don't pretend to be experts on everything, and they're not afraid to admit when they don't know something.
I like that. It makes them more human.
Right. It also gives them an opportunity to poke fun at themselves, which is always a good sign.
That's nice.
One question they got right was about Trump calling Zelensky a dictator without elections.
Oh, I remember that. That was ridiculous.
It was. Zelensky was democratically elected, of course. They didn't hold back in criticizing Trump's words and actions.
Good for them.
It shows how comedy can be a tool for speaking truth to power, even when dealing with sensitive subjects. Another question they nailed was about legislation in Utah that would ban collective bargaining for teachers, firefighters, police officers, and other public employees.
Wow, that's a big one.
It is. It has huge implications for workers' rights and the balance of power between labor and management.
Definitely.
They condemned the legislation, of course, highlighting the crucial role unions play in protecting workers and ensuring fair wages and working conditions.
It's a reminder that even seemingly local issues can have national significance.
Absolutely. They also talked about Trump's clash with the governor of Maine, who stood up to him regarding state and federal regulations.
Wait, what happened there?
Well, Trump was trying to pressure the governor into doing something that went against state law, and the governor basically told him to back off.
Good for
It
him.
was a powerful act of defiance.
It shows that we're not powerless in the face of overreach.
Exactly. We have a voice,
Hmm.
and we have the right to hold our elected officials accountable.
Sometimes a little humor can go a long way in exposing hypocrisy and inspiring resistance.
I agree completely. So where do we go from here with our deep dive?
Well, we've seen how this comedy duo uses humor to tackle a range of issues. Mental health, politics, social issues. What else is on the agenda?
They also delve into pop culture, providing a unique perspective on current trends and events.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too.
What do they talk about?
Well, I'm particularly interested in their take on the Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary special.
Oh, yeah. I heard it was quite a show.
It sounds like they had a lot to say about how the show has evolved over the years and how it reflects changing societal norms and comedic sensibilities.
It would be fascinating to hear their thoughts on that.
It would. They discussed both the beloved returning characters and the sketches that haven't aged so gracefully.
That was an interesting conversation.
It was.
Yeah.
They talked about how humor can act like a time capsule, capturing a particular era.
And how our perspectives change over time.
Exactly.
So let's dive into their analysis of SNL's legacy, the highs, the lows, and what it all tells us about comedy today.
Sounds good to me. They started by discussing some of the returning characters that appeared during the special. Kristen Wiig's Donice, Will Ferrell's Robert Goulet, Molly Shannon's Sally O'Malley.
Those are some classics.
They are. They also mentioned Pete Davidson's Chad, Rachel Dratch's Debbie Downer, and Bobby Moynihan's Drunk Uncle.
A good mix of old and new.
Right. It seems like they appreciated that blend,
Yeah.
highlighting the show's ability to adapt and stay relevant over time.
It's impressive how SNL has managed to stay on the air for so long.
It really is. They also mentioned some of the pre-taped segments, including a tribute to SNL's history of physical comedy, and a digital short led by Andy Samberg about the anxieties of working on the show.
That sounds interesting.
And then there was this segment that revisited sketches and characters that haven't aged well.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks introduced it. He joked about the audience's role in laughing at offensive material in the past.
Right, we talked about that earlier as a really thought-provoking point.
It is. It makes you question how humor evolves.
Yeah.
And the responsibility that comes with it, both for the creators and the audience.
For sure.
Overall, it sounds like they were impressed with the special. They found it both entertaining and insightful.
I'm not surprised.
They did, however, express some reservations about certain aspects, like the lack of recognition for some key figures, and the choice to feature certain celebrities over more deserving comedic talent.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, they questioned why Kim Kardashian was given such a prominent role, while more seasoned SNL alumni were seemingly sidelined.
I can see their point.
They also critiqued the opening musical number featuring the Blues Brothers. They felt it lacked the energy and authenticity of the original.
Oh, that's too bad.
It is. But they did praise Adam Sandler's musical tribute, which honored some of the show's longtime crew members and included a touching nod to his late friend Chris Farley.
Oh, that's sweet.
It was a nice moment. It's a reminder that even amidst all the glitz and glamour, there's still room for genuine emotion and heartfelt tributes. Overall, it sounds like they felt the SNL special was a fitting celebration of the show's legacy, with all its imperfections.
It speaks to the enduring power of comedy, to entertain, provoke, and reflect the times we live in.
For sure. Now, how about we move on to their review of commercials?
Sounds good to me.
It's their unique take on media criticism, focusing on something we're all bombarded with on a daily basis.
It's a clever way to highlight how pervasive advertising is and how it shapes our perceptions of products, services, and even ourselves.
Absolutely. So the first commercial they dissected was for Jardiance, the diabetes medication.
Right.
They honed in on the jarring contrast between the cheerful tone of the ad and the long list of potentially alarming side effects.
I've noticed that too. It's almost like they're trying to distract you from the risks.
Exactly. It makes you question the ethical considerations of pharmaceutical advertising.
For sure.
And the responsibility companies have to be transparent about the potential downsides of their products. They also analyzed a commercial for Wegovy, the weight loss drug, which, again, featured a bunch of happy people who'd previously struggled with obesity.
Right, I think I've seen that one too.
It's everywhere.
It is.
And again, they pointed out the contrast between the upbeat messaging and the possibility of serious side effects. It's a reminder to think critically about the claims being made.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't just take advertising at face value, especially when it comes to our health.
Being informed consumers means doing our own research and consulting with healthcare professionals.
Exactly. Don't just base your decisions on what you see in a commercial.
Good advice.
Now, for something a little different, they also reviewed a commercial for Red House Furniture. It's a store in High Point, North Carolina, that prides itself on being inclusive.
Oh, that sounds nice.
It is. The commercial features a diverse cast of characters, including Big Head, a black employee who loves pumping iron and pumping furniture into people's homes,
Okay, that's funny.
and 10 Gauge, a white employee who enjoys deer hunting, bass fishing, and extending credit to all people.
Sounds like a quirky bunch.
They are. They found the commercial both funny and heartwarming, praising its message of inclusivity and its quirky, low-budget charm.
It's refreshing to see a commercial that embraces diversity.
It is. It proves that you don't need a fortune to create a memorable and effective ad.
And that humor can be a powerful tool for connecting with people.
Exactly. Now, they wrapped up their commercial review with a more cynical look at the sheer volume of pharmaceutical advertising, especially for drugs targeting specific conditions like HIV and weight loss.
Right, there's a lot of that these days.
It's overwhelming. They expressed frustration with the repetitive nature of these ads and questioned the economics of targeting such niche audiences.
I can see the point.
They also pointed out the potential for these ads to make viewers feel anxious or inadequate, leading them to seek out medications they might not even need.
That's a good point. It's important to be aware of how advertising can influence our emotions and behavior.
Absolutely. So we've seen how they use humor to address a wide range of topics, from mental health and politics to pop culture and advertising. But they also have this segment called Headlines and Predictions, where they take real news stories and add their own comedic spin.
That sounds fun.
It is. It allows them to showcase their wit and comedic timing while offering a satirical commentary on the absurdities of the news cycle.
So what headlines did they tackle this week?
The first one was about Elon Musk using a chainsaw as a prop to symbolize his efforts to shrink the federal workforce in the Department of Government Efficiency.
Okay, I'm already intrigued.
Of course, Paul couldn't resist adding a morbid twist. He imagined Musk tripping over ketamine and falling onto the chainsaw blade.
Oh my.
Dark humor, for sure. But it's also a commentary on Musk's sometimes reckless behavior and the potential consequences of his actions.
I see.
Next, they discuss Walmart's warning about inflation and tariffs potentially slowing down sales, which could lead to a drop in the stock market. Paul's response: Walmart offering a Trump discount with adult diapers and bladder control pads half off.
Oh, that's classic Paul.
It is. Targeting both Trump's perceived base and their anxieties about the economy.
It's a clever way to connect those two things.
It is. Then they moved on to the meeting between President Zelensky and a Trump envoy. Zelensky described it as productive.
Diplomatic language.
Right. But Paul, ever the cynic, suggested that Zelensky wasn't referring to the meeting itself, but rather to Trump's bowels.
Oh, Paul.
It's crude,
Yeah.
but it's also a way to highlight the absurdity of Trump's diplomatic efforts and his tendency to prioritize personal gain over national interests.
I get it.
They also discussed the deportation of migrants from the U.S. to Guantanamo Bay, a controversial move that raises questions about the legality and morality of Trump's immigration policies.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is, Paul's punchline, that the true worst of the worst are being appointed to high-level cabinet positions.
Wow, that's a sharp jab.
It is. A sobering reminder that the real threats to American democracy often come from within. Now, for something lighter, they talked about the growing popularity of uphill skiing.
Uphill skiing.
Yeah. It involves ascending a ski hill while wearing skis.
Why would anyone do that?
I have no idea. But Paul found it perfectly logical, given the state of the world where Trump's pronouncements defy all reason.
I see. So it's like a metaphor for the absurdity of it all.
Exactly. And finally, they discussed Coca-Cola's new orange cream flavor.
Okay, that's random.
It is. But they drew a parallel between the resurgence of this classic taste and the unfortunate return of Trump to the presidency.
Interesting connection.
Right. Using humor to tie together seemingly disparate topics.
It's a clever way to offer a satirical commentary on current events.
Exactly.
So they managed to find humor in both the mundane and the momentous.
They did. It speaks to their comedic talent and their ability to find the funny side of even the most challenging news stories.
Agreed.
Now, what about next week's show? Any hints?
Well, they ended the episode by teasing some upcoming topics, including Chris's experience delivering performance reviews at work, and a potential deep dive into the world of pharmaceutical advertising.
Oh, that could be interesting.
They also encourage listeners to send in their own experiences with commercials and suggest topics for future shows.
It sounds like they're really engaging with their audience.
They are. It's a reminder that the show is a collaborative effort, with the hosts and listeners working together to explore the world around them through the lens of humor and insightful commentary.
It's a great approach.
Yeah.
And it makes for a really engaging show.
Sounds like they've got a lot of great material in the pipeline.
Yeah, they do. And it just goes to show that even a comedy radio show can spark some insightful conversations
Yeah.
and offer a fresh perspective on things.
It really is all about perspective, isn't it?
It is.
Finding those connections that make you think about things in a new way.
Exactly.
And that's what makes these deep dives so interesting. We take those seemingly random bits of information and weave them together
Right.
to try to see the bigger picture.
Right. And hopefully we have some laughs along the way.
Exactly. Laughter is always a good thing.
So as we wrap things up, we encourage you to look for those unexpected sources of knowledge and inspiration. You never know where you'll find something that sparks your curiosity or challenges your assumptions.
And if you happen to come across a particularly interesting commercial, be sure to send it our way.
We're always on the lookout for new material for our deep dives.
Always.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep laughing.